Hello, I'm Kat. Welcome to my video where I talk about how books help me in my language learning. So I'm going to show you the different types of books that I have for learning Russian, and I do have more books in other languages, but Russian is my fullest set. More on that later. So the books that I use fall into three main categories. We've got textbooks, we've got reference books, and we've got fiction books. So the first set, textbooks, I have no experience with using these outside of a classroom setting. I've never done self-directed learning from textbooks, and if you have, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. So my teacher for individual lessons uses Tochka.ru as the set of textbooks they use, and my group class use these ones, which are the Ruslan textbooks. Stop that falling over. Yeah, so both different types are very good, and both have a lot of associated resources with them, either for the teacher or the student, so like videos or audio files for listening exercises, or workbooks to go deeper into examples on certain classes and categories. So the two Ruslan textbooks I have, the first one takes the user up to A1 level, which is kind of like early beginner, I think they call it the breakthrough level, and the second one goes up to A2 level, which is sort of your more developing beginner, which they call the way stage level. And I've never used textbooks beyond a beginner level, which I think is why I currently have no French textbooks, because I felt like I had a good foundation in French from when I was learning at high school, and now when I began learning it or strengthening it as I was older, I felt like I already had that good foundation for just being a little more freeform in my learning. So personally I'd recommend textbooks as a good resource for when you're starting a language from scratch and you want to build that foundation and initial structure to put all the rest of your learning in. So next up are my reference books. And so in this internet era, it feels like it's a bit unnecessary to have your reference information wrapped in a dead tree, especially as like anything I would want to know is just a Google away. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with sort of my screens and devices, and I can never tell from one day to the next whether a device is going to be an absolutely indispensable tool or a hideous distraction. So the option to sort of seek the information offline is very useful to me. So and these are my reference books which I have for Russian. For any language that I want to learn, I always try and have a dictionary. Yeah, I know I could just Google translate it, but if you could see behind the camera, it is two walls of bookshelves. So let it be known that I like books. I like physical books. It's always just useful to have a two-way dictionary, so I can look up a word if I come across it in Russian and understand what it means in English, and vice versa. If I want to say something in Russian and I just know the English word, then I can look it up here. And I feel like buying a dictionary is often my first step in learning a language. So for me, it's a signal to myself of, okay, this has gone from my list of languages I might try learning in the future to a language that I'm now engaged with to some degree. So there we go. A dictionary, always useful to have. I also have, both for Russian and French, one of these big books of verbs. Conjugation. The more common a verb is, the more likely it is to be irregular, and until you've sort of memorised and internalised how different verbs are conjugated, it's always useful just to have this reference on hand, so that you know that here's me struggling to think of an example. You know, I know that znakomit means sort of to meet or to become acquainted with, but I don't know how to conjugate it. I apologise to Russian speakers. I completely blanked, and I probably am pulling a verb from thin air, and I also probably massively mispronounced it, so sorry. So just being able to you know, I know what the verb is, I know what the infinitive is, but just to double check how it conjugates. And for Russian, which has two different versions of every verb, the perfective and the imperfective, Russian learners, you know what I'm talking about with that. Being able to go check if the verb that I remember is the imperfective or perfective version, and then find the actual version of the verb that I want, is just very useful to me. Verbs and conjugation is something I struggle with a lot more than other language aspects like vocabulary. Because yes, I've got a good memory for the basic, this is the word about the thing, but how that word changes, I find it harder to, depending on usage, is something I find it harder to keep hold of. So yeah, the ability to just look up conjugations is very useful to me. And also, I only have this in Russian, I don't have this in any other language, but I've got this book which is very interesting, which is a comprehensive Russian grammar, which, yeah, I guess I also have a book on English grammar as well. But I think I spoke in my last video about how it was the way that languages are structured and formed, and the rules, the unspoken rules, or, you know, the rules you don't realise you've internalised until you have, and, you know, the oddball little, well, in this case, you know, things happen totally differently. These are the things that really interest me. So having a grammar that actually sort of puts these things into words that you kind of like half knew, is both useful and interesting. And I must say I've not actually used this book as much as I should have, but yeah, I think I shall try and refer to it more often. So whereas when I use the textbooks, I'm going through them in order and using them in a very, you know, concerted way to progress from, you know, A to B, from where I am to a new goal. The reference books, the dictionaries, the grammars and the verb books are purely there just to be dipped in and out of. Like, it's better to encounter a word or a verb or a grammar concept in the wild, see it in its usage in the language, and then go to a reference book for more information or to solidify your knowledge or to learn around that concept once you've seen it for real, and then to understand how it works and why it's like that, why it is the way it is when you saw it in the real context, if that makes sense. So yeah, so those are my reference books. Yes, the internet covers all of these things, so dictionary, obviously, Google Translate or Reverso Context Translate. For the verb conjugations, I don't know about other languages, but there's a website called Cooljugator, which helps with the conjugation of Russian verbs, and, you know, plenty of learning resources online where they'll explain to you specific aspects of a language's grammar. But as I say, sometimes it's just nice to hold the book in your hands. So last up in my types of books that I have to help me learn languages is fiction books. And I guess what I really mean by this is sort of reading resources. For me, I love fiction. I read fiction in English, so that's what I would feel most drawn to read in any language. But if you prefer non-fiction or the news or other, any other sort of source text in your native language, then seek out reading resources of that type in your target language. So for me, and with fiction, these are the ones I've got. And first off, I'm going to start with one of these. So I guess there's two different types of reading resources as well within categories within categories. The first type are the ones which are designed for language learners, and the other ones which are the ones which are designed for just general users of that language. So in the language resources designed for learners, I really do recommend these, and this is the Russian short stories for beginners, and I believe that this chap, Ollie Richards and Alex Rawlings, I believe that this is actually a set, and that you can find them in a multitude of languages. I've only tried the Russian one yet, but I really do quite enjoy it. And according to the back, that these are stories written at a fairly easy level. They're designed for people who are at the A2, which I think, as we said, is the sort of developing beginner, the way stage level, and between that and B1, which is the early intermediate level. And I can't remember what name they put on that. So when I was talking about how I like to use textbooks to take me through the beginner, the basic levels, and then go a little bit more freeform, this would be a great start and overlap with that period, where I'm now going into actually using the language to enjoy things in that language and the use of the language. So they're really good. They're written in different tenses, different styles, from different points of view. First person, third person, and each little story has sort of. Yes, do they all have little chapters within them? Yes. Well, they have little chapters within them, and after each one there is a glossary of words which were possibly new words which came up in the story, and a little multiple choice quiz. And you're supposed to not, the reference books play no part in this. You're not supposed to slave over every word and go to your dictionary for everything you don't understand. Just sort of try and read it through, gaining meaning from context, from anything that is new to you, and then after you've read it, sort of you can use the glossary, or then sort of go back and fill in your understanding from there, which is great. Which it kind of sort of, if you follow that approach, it kind of removes the crutch of being able to just use another resource to translate things the minute you come up against a roadblock. And and they're actually, I feel, for me, a really good level. So I very much enjoy these, and that's Russian Stories for Beginners. It's a resource designed for learners. Another resource designed for learners is Parallel Texts. So you have stories, a book where, unlike the Russian Short Stories for Beginners, where all you get is the Russian, but it's fairly easy, the dual text ones, they do give you a translation, and it's generally laid out such that on one page you have the Russian, or whatever language, and then on the facing page you have the exact same text, but in English. So you can read, but there's always sort of the backup there of popping across and seeing the translation. I think what I found interesting about this is that it's it's a good translation. It's a good translation. I find it's not word for word. If what's being said in Russian is somewhat idiomatic, then what's given in English as the translation is not word for word of the idiom, but an equivalent English idiom. So you're getting the meaning and the feeling of it. It's not just a word for word translation, which I think sometimes loses flavour and meaning. So yeah, I've not actually gone very far into this one, and there's a fair amount of footnotes as well, just to give a little bit more context for stuff that needs explanation. So I'm planning on hitting this one quite hard once I finish the Russian Short Stories for Beginners. But yes, I'm not yet fully through that one yet. I don't know if it offers a level, but yeah, I would say this is definitely sort of at the intermediate level. I would say possibly a little beyond me, but not that far at all. So out of the remaining reading resources, these are the ones which are designed for users of the language rather than learners of the language. And first up is a Harry Potter in translation. So what I was really going for when I chose Harry Potter as a fundamental part of some of my language learnings across multiple languages is that I was looking for a kids level book. So I think in French I have a few other kids ones, like a translation of the Artemis Fowl books and Le Petit Prince, which I guess is not a translation, but yeah, so they are designed for native speakers of the language, but native speakers of the language who are at perhaps a more beginner level. I picked Harry Potter because the books came out when I was a late teenager, so I've read them, and I was reading a lot then, and I've had them since then. So I've read them, and I've read them a lot. So pretty much any book in the Harry Potter series, I kind of already know what's going to happen, sort of paragraph to paragraph, because I can remember it. So it's remembering stories is a curse in one sense, in the rewatchability, rereadability sense, but in the gives me a pretty good sort of ongoing contextual translation when reading a foreign language version of a book that I've read multiple times in English. I find it very helpful. So yeah, so that's kind of why I picked Harry Potter. I'm very familiar with it. Oh, and the other thing is, of course, it's massively popular, so it's been translated into a lot of languages. So I'm fairly certain that any language I might want to learn, I can find a Harry Potter translation in it and read that book. This decision, and yeah, of course, for me, was something that I decided before it began to become obvious, to me at least, that J.K. Rowling's kind of a bit of a rubbish person. Maybe she's always that way and I missed it, but it's a lot more publicly known now. So while I've got all these Harry Potter books that I do read in foreign languages, if I switch to another language and go down that path with that, I guess I'm going to have a decision to make on whether I want to continue to put money in her pocket by buying the translated versions of Harry Potter in Arabic or Spanish or what have you. But yes, for now. So that's Harry Potter. Harry Potter is definitely a big part of my current language learning for French and Russian. There we go. And then the other type of reading resource is on the floor now. Okay, so I'm back. Book retrieved. Sun banished. Let's do this. And the last one of my reading resources that I have in Russian is this one. It's a novel by Boris Akunin called Azazel. It's the first in a series of sort of pulpy adventures set in the late 1800s. I haven't actually started reading past the first page of this because I think it's a little bit of a stretch beyond my level, but I did start reading it in English and then had to stop myself because I deliberately wanted to take that crutch away. But this is a novel written in Russian. I'm assuming because it's set in the 1800s, it's not written in contemporary Russian, even though it is written now. it's from the modern era. So the Russian I learned from this is probably not going to be reflective of how it's currently used, but there we go. And one thing actually that I think specific to Russian that makes it a bit of a difficult read and a bit of a stretch for me is that the font is ridiculously tiny. And my Russian friend tells me this is actually fairly common for Russian books, Russian novels, especially those which are available abroad. is that they definitely, I think, try and get value for money out of each piece of paper, and I'm fairly comfortable with Cyrillic, but perhaps not yet comfortable enough to be able to read it swiftly when it's fairly small. I think I'm perhaps a large print girl. Let's put it down to that, and not to my deteriorating eyesight with age. Yeah, but I'm definitely looking forward to reading this one, and unlike the Harry Potter, it is I was going to say an adult book, but that makes it sound like erotica, but it is a book written for grown-ups rather than for kids. So there should be a little bit more advanced language in it for me to go learn. There we go. That's my full set of books that I have for learning Russian at the moment, and they all have their sort of different categories and different uses. The textbooks are great for getting started. The reference books are just great to have there as a backup, and I highly recommend reading fiction books as a way to up your level. Anytime, I think, as long as you've got a good baseline to work with, anytime I pick up a piece of fiction in one of my target languages, I feel like even the shortest reading section takes me up leaps and bounds. It's reminding me of things I've forgotten, or giving me new stuff to learn. Unfortunately, I don't really get that much time nowadays for reading in general in any language, which is unfortunate because I love reading. But I think that I used to carve out time for it when I was on my commute, and as a result of the global situation, I now have no commute. So, plus side, so glad to have that time back for me and not be spending it on a train amongst irritating strangers. But I'm not spending that time I've got back in the same way that I was spending it when I was trapped on a train. I'm spending my morning reclaimed commute not getting out of bed, and my evening reclaimed commute playing pool or Mario Kart or VR games with my husband. So such a great tool, reading fiction in your target language, but not one I'm strongly utilising at the moment. Hopefully making this video will encourage me to get back on it. So there are still other language learning strategies that do fit into the current shape of my life, so I'm not, my neglecting of reading is not causing a neglect of language, but I'm going to leave those for another video, and I hope to see you there as you join me as I talk about other tools that I use for my language learning process, for example audio resources or apps or websites or videos and all that good stuff, but we'll leave those for another day. Until then, have a smashing day.